What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video. And hey, it's the weekend. That means it's time to bring you another 2023 NFL mock draft. 3 rounds we're going to cover. Today is going to be round 1. Saturday will be round 2. And then we'll close it out on Sunday with round 3. And this will mark the 3rd to last mock I'll have on the channel before we are live for day 1 as well as day 2 of the NFL draft. So hopefully you all join us, and definitely subscribe if you are new to the channel. Want to be a part of those draft coverage videos and my final big board. And then of course all the football coverage you'll have there after the draft. Like if you enjoyed today's video, and of course the most important thing you can do, leave me a comment down below in the comment section. What picks make sense, which ones don't? Who's your favorite team, and do you like the selections I made for your favorite squad? Also, one more note, I did want to shout out, I have my first channel member, so big time shout out, and I'm going to work on an end card screen, so that way when we have members join, that way they can get that shout out. And then I'm also going to be doing some members only stuff as with, I get a little bit further along in this process and whatnot, but wanted to raise that that point because somebody has now joined as a member. So I have 3 different tiers. They're all pretty inexpensive, generally inexpensive. If anybody wants to join, you're going to get some exclusive videos, maybe some exclusive live streams, as well as your name at the end of every video. So seriously, thank you all so much for even supporting me and even thinking about that. So with that point aside, let's go ahead and jump into the meat and potatoes of why everyone is here. And that is my updated mock. I'm going to have Bryce Young be the #1 overall pick. It has been CJ Stroud over the last handful of mocks, but I've also said in that same time period, if the pick were up to me, I'd go Bryce Young. So you get this change in the betting markets, huge shift in the favor of Bryce Young. Is it smoke? Is it something we should take into account? It's always hard to tell, but just to switch it up a little bit, and also the other guy is going to go right after this. So it's not too big of a difference for the entire mock draft as a whole, but Bryce Young, again, I think he should be the pick at 1. Has the best pocket presence, the best footwork. I think he's NFL ready from the technical standpoint. You're not fixing up his feet like Will Levis. You're not trying to iron out the decision making and work on the throwing motion to make it the same for every throw like Anthony Richardson. And also differentiating him from CJ Stroud, where Stroud's got 3 offensive linemen that are going to go in the first 2 rounds. He's got the best wide receiver in the country, Marvin Harrison Jr. Bryce Young was, a big reason why, and I would argue the reason why Alabama was even in contention for the college football playoff. And this was one of the weaker Alabama rosters. So a lot of that was fully on the shoulders of Bryce Young. So I think you're getting a guy who has it at an elite level, shoulders up, great footwork, great pocket feel, and fantastic feel for the game as well. Good enough arm plus accuracy. I mean, there's just a lot to love. And then that takes us to CJ Stroud going #2. And I even had this in my best offensive fits. I kind of prefer this honestly for CJ Stroud because this whole time, and one of the reasons he's not my QB1 and he's not my QB2 is because he comes from that awesome environment at Ohio State, but also gets to play in the Ryan Day offense. And Houston's roster, isn't, head and shoulders above competitors like Ohio State's is maybe. But Bobby Slowick coming over from San Francisco, we know how that, Shanahan offense and what it can do for, a team. Look at Miami completely looking like a new squad, and that offense becomes one of the most potent in the NFL. And everywhere these Shanahan disciples go, success follows. Sean McVay, another good example once he gets to LA. So if Bobby Slowick can have that same track record, and also I think that offense is a great fit for CJ Stroud in and of itself, but I think if he goes to Houston, it mitigates some of my concern leaving the Day offense and going to the NFL, and it's like, who knows what it's going to look like. Obviously the talent pool, again, is a bit of an issue, but this guy is a cerebral processor, to me the best processor in the class, to me the most accurate quarterback in the class. So to just drop him into a Shanahan offense, that feels like a match made in heaven to me. And I think, with all their picks and extra resources this year as well as next, they'll be able to build up the supporting cast around him. So I would love to see CJ Stroud, kind of dropped into Houston. And that takes us to the Arizona Cardinals, or that's who is originally scheduled to have this pick. I'm going to go ahead and have them and Indianapolis flip here. It's going to be, 4 plus 79, and I'm trying to look at my notes here, a 4th rounder for pick #3. I know this isn't necessarily a huge Chris Ballard type of move, but we're all human, and uncertainty and things that are out of your control are things that make us uncomfortable, right? So I think this could be the type of spot where Ballard kind of breaks his mold. And plus, they fired their head coach last year midseason, Frank Reich. I know there were rumblings that Ballard would be on the hot seat as well. This is kind of the move where it's like, if we don't get our quarterback, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be in Indianapolis. So the move up by one spot, yes, you forfeit, an end of day 2 pick and an early day 3 pick, but I think it might be worth it just to have the certainty, at least more certainty, and you're only waiting to see what happens 1 and 2 versus 1, 2, and who's going to move to 3. Is it going to be Tennessee? Or the Raiders looking to make a move? And there's always a team that makes a splash that we don't see coming. Is that for the number 3 pick? Takes all that by the wayside and gets rid of that type of uncertainty out of play, and it allows the Colts to kind of be like, okay, cool, we have 2 picks ahead of us, and then we should be able to get our guy, which here, I'm going to make it Will Levis. This easily could be Anthony Richardson, and if you're moving up, I could see where it's like, we're giving up extra assets, let's go for the high upside. I think both these guys come with a lot of upside, and I've been going Anthony Richardson pretty heavy, and I get where you bring in Gardner Minshew, and it's like, okay, well, that's to give Anthony Richardson the time to sit before he starts. But yeah, I can see that. I think the same excuse could be made for Will Levis as he learns a playbook and you clean up his footwork. So I think the Gardner Minshew addition it could be applicable to either one of these quarterbacks as the selection, but you get both GMs, the head GM Ballard and the assistant Dodge. You get the full coaching staff going on to Levis's pro day, and man, I think there's a lot of traits there. And as much as Shane Steichen, Jalen Hurts, that relationship feels like it could correlate with Shane Steichen working that same magic with Anthony Richardson. I think what Steichen did as the OC and the play caller in Los Angeles with Justin Herbert, a lot of those same things could be applicable here. And hey, you're talking about a guy with a big arm, mobile, not a great college situation, but can you transform that? And also a guy who played under 2 NFL OCs, former NFL OCs. One now is back at the NFL level, and one I like a whole lot more than the other. But nevertheless, a guy that can pick up that offense pretty quick, which we saw Justin Herbert have to do due to, Tyrod Taylor unfortunately having his lung punctured by a trainer. One of the last things you would ever expect to happen before an NFL game. So I think this relationship works just as much as Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen. So wanted to bring him back up just in case people did not see my best offensive fits video. And then Arizona here at 4 is still going to get Will Anderson. You accumulate one other top 100 pick and then an additional 4th rounder on top of getting your guy. Look, I get where Chris Sims is saying there's no way he's going to be the first edge and Tyree Wilson has everything you're looking for. I think I just see it a little differently. Sometimes people see the same tape, right, and they have the same takes, and then sometimes people see something kind of completely different. I like Tyree Wilson a ton. We'll talk about him in a moment, but I just don't see that elite get-off and strength elite get off and speed and bend that he talks about with Wilson. I see a lot of that with Will Anderson, and I see sneaky power in his profile as well. And he's also a guy who played a whole lot of 4-tech. He didn't even play outside of offensive linemen's shoulders, right? Or those tackles outside shoulder. So as much as I give that break to Lucas Van Ness and Will McDonald, and it's like, well, they weren't lining up outside the tackle. That's where they're going to be best. The same excuse has to be used here for Will Anderson. He still had good production, and he still was the guy that every offense, week in and week out, was drawing every ounce of attention from whoever Alabama was playing. He was still that guy, and he did it from the 4-tech. So lining up on the other side of an offensive tackle and letting his speed play more, letting his bend play more, on top of already adding weight and having pretty good strength in his profile, given 250 isn't necessarily, it's not Tyree Wilson. So yeah, I think he's a bona fide stud to me, the second best non-quarterback in this class. And if you're taking into account the off-field concerns around Jalen Carter, maybe you do give Will Anderson the bump. So would love this outcome here for Arizona. 2 more picks, plus you still get your guy. That's a win. Then we get to Seattle at 5, and I wanted to do something a little different here. Anthony Richardson here at pick number 5. Again, it was another selection in my best offensive fits video, and I do think the pairing makes a lot of sense. I am someone who thinks Anthony Richardson should just play right away. But if you're in the camp that says, hey, let's give him a year or 2 to start before he starts, Seattle's kind of the perfect environment for him to go to. I think they have a great culture. I think him and Geno Smith as a mentor-mentee relationship would be a fantastic one. And I think this is just a spot where I look at Seattle and like, when's the next time they're picking in the top 5? When's the next time they're going to be not only picking the top 5, picking the top 5 in a good quarterback class? Because I know everyone's hyped up about next year, and we'll see. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. But everyone's got that, next year's class kind of syndrome. Always, every time we get to late March, early April, it's like, next year. It's like, well, why don't we focus on here now? And, Seattle and Detroit, I don't know how many years in the next 2 to 3, they're going to be picking anywhere near 5 or 6, respectively, for Seattle and Detroit. So I think you take this swing of the bat. This pick comes from Denver, so it's not even your selection. You still got another first-round pick. why not see what Anthony Richardson's all about? You give Geno Smith a year, maybe two. All of his guaranteed money is for the next calendar year. So it's not even necessarily for 23, 24. It is for 2023. So that's a really interesting way of structuring that contract. And it could open the door where Richardson takes over. And look, I am so excited that Geno Smith is it was a great story last year, deserved comeback player of the year throughout the season. When I did my award picks, he continued to be my selection for that said award. But Geno Smith makes the Seattle Seahawks playoff contenders for the next 2 years, let's say. Taking Anthony Richardson, when you might not be picking in the top 5 for the next 3 years, gives you an opportunity to be playoff competitive for the next decade. And I think that's something Seattle should heavily consider here at 5, especially if Richardson just falls in lap. You don't have to make a move. He comes to you. That's hard to pass. And then that gives Detroit Jalen Carter. Obviously, the immaturity concerns are going to be there for some people. And even just given the fact that he was a part of an accident that led to the loss of life, he's just not going to be for everybody. And I get it. And I see it in my comments all the time. But for Detroit, man, he is a perfect scheme fit. And he's a guy that can help them in the run game, which they had problems with that last year. He brings more pass rush juice, both with kind of a finesse repertoire and knows how to use his hands, but also plays with a ton of power. He's the full package. And to me, that's why focusing on the player here, he's the best non-quarterback in this class. And you slide him next to Aleem McNeil, I feel pretty good about that interior stopping the run, plus Aleem McNeil's pass rush upside, plus Carter's pass rush upside, and you have Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston. That's looking like a really scary defensive line. And they could still certainly go corner, and I'll ponder that for my future mocks after the Jeff Okudah trade. There's also a deep corner class. And I think for a year you can hold it down with Mosley and Sutton and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson kind of playing in a rotation there. Probably Sutton and Mosley on the outside, CJ Gardner-Johnson there in the nickel. And then you can add a corner at 18 or in the second round and still get some good value and get a guy who can compete for a starting job. Plus they have a Fetu Melifonwu third-round pick from 2 years ago. So thought about corner here, and I might do it in my next mock, but for right now, I mean, Jalen Carter, again, perfect fit to that defense, and we know what the player is. Just focusing on the player, that would be a huge addition to that Detroit defense. All right, on to pick number 7. This is where I'm going to have Christian Gonzalez come off the board. And once we get to pick 12 with Houston, I'm going to kind of come back to this. Really thought about Devin Witherspoon in this spot, but decided to go with the upside play. I think Witherspoon comes with a higher floor while Gonzalez gives you the higher ceiling, just because he has the size, he has unbelievable movement skills. Not that Witherspoon doesn't, because I talk about and sing the praises of his acceleration and agility. Then he runs 4.42 at his pro day. But Gonzalez, it looks effortless, man. And he is just gliding around the field, both at Colorado and at Oregon. But the big difference was this year, and the big reason why I was like, yeah, Christian Gonzalez is that dude. It wasn't just Indy. It's the more I watch, it's like the ball skills. It's almost night and day from Colorado to Oregon. The guy just tracks the ball so much better, reacts to the ball in the air a whole lot better. His hands, in turn, have improved so much. And it's just with 1 year. So to think there might be even more room for him to grow. But seeing him be able to add that playmaking, those ball skills, and do more than just be big and fast, kind of what he was at Colorado, that's what made him like that cornerback one for me. And I still think he's kind of growing. And to see him take strides last year leads me to believe that he still has that room to grow. So love that fit. I think he's great in man, variety of zones, can play press, can play off. So that's going to be pivotal for Patrick Graham, the DC in Vegas, who is going to mix it up a lot. Then in Atlanta, I'm going to go Tyree Wilson here. Again, another spot that could be corner, but I'm going to go Tyree Wilson here. Give him this long, big physical power pass rusher that they don't have on the roster. I like Arnold Ebiketie with where they got him in the second round last season or last draft, but he is a speed bend, slider built edge rusher. And Tyree Wilson is basically the complete opposite. Again, I don't really see the elite get off that Chris Sims described it as. Elite, yeah, I'm not ready to kind of describe it as that, or the bend really. I think he's maybe more than what you would expect for 6'6", 280 something, sure. But you're making this selection because his wingspan's 1 inch shorter than a 7-footer in Giannis Antetokounmpo, which is unbelievable. And he continues week in and week out, especially this last year. But I'll give him credit. 2 years ago, the tape's not as bad as people want to make it out to be. 2 years ago was better than 3 years ago from the little I was able to gather. And then last year, he kind of fully put it together and had the best year of his college career. And he's doing it while not having great hands or hand placement, doesn't really have a full move set. He just has long arms and can long arm tackles. And then he's so strong. And at 280 pounds, there's only so much he could do against a human that size that he just wins with power. And I think his body projects to be a pretty good run defender at the next level. And he always plays with effort, and that leads to a lot of run defense production at Texas Tech. So, I I can't have him over Will Anderson, but that doesn't mean I don't like Tyree Wilson. You just have to understand what type of edge rusher you're drafting here. And for Atlanta, I think he's the perfect complement to Ebiketie, a guy who wins with speed and bend, another guy who wins with his arms and his power, and then untapped potential, because once he figures out how to use his hands, garners a full move set, then we're talking about Tyree Wilson, maybe, just maybe, being the best edge rusher in this class. All right, anyways, let's move on to the Chicago Bears. Man, I thought about Peter Skoronski, but I just couldn't do it. Paris Johnson's been my OT1 this whole cycle. And I'm glad that it hasn't moved. And if anything, I've only grown more and more fond of the player. Him and Brian Branch, once I do my updated big board, just outside that blue chip tier. And I don't have Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon too far off. I kind of gone from, there's only 3 blue chippers here to where there's like, maybe I could squeeze a 4th in there. Maybe there's a 5th guy. But it's more so like there's 3 blue chippers, and then I don't know what the next color would be, really what would be that next step down. But there's a bunch of guys just outside that blue chip tier. But that video will be coming before the NFL draft, obviously. But Paris Johnson Jr. comes from a zone blocking scheme, gets drafted into one here in Chicago. 6'6", 315, has the best feet of anybody in this class at the offensive tackle position. Awesome mirroring ability. Played on both sides of the offensive line for the last 2 years with the Buckeyes. So whether he's playing left tackle and you're moving Braxton Jones over, or you're drafting Paris Johnson Jr. and doing what the Lions did with Penei Sewell and flipping him over the right side, I think either combination could work. It just comes down to who's more comfortable making that flip. And then you move Tevin Jenkins inside to guard, Cody Whitehair plays center, and all of a sudden, at least on paper, that offensive line in Chicago looks really, really stout. Or I don't want to say stout. That may be getting ahead of myself. But it at least doesn't look like the problem for that offense. Plus, you add DJ Moore. Man, I think with Moore and then Paris Johnson Jr. here, there's no excuses for Justin Fields. So we get to see what he's really all about. Then we get to Philadelphia here at pick 10. And this may be early for some, but I've been kind of thinking about it. And I'm like, dude, you look at, like Lucas Van Ness. And I like Van Ness. But it comes with, a little bit of work, a little bit of projection. What does he look like on the edge? What are we doing with his body, gaining or adding weight? Or are we keeping him at 270? Or Nolan Smith, it's like, he's 235. Can we bulk him up? Then what does that do for his speed? And where was that pass rush production? Kalijah Kancey, outside of short arms, there's really nothing you can knock. I mean, 6'2", 280 is small and lighter for a defensive tackle, but I don't think Philadelphia, I think Philadelphia actually is a spot where he's perfectly suited to kind of land. Put him next to Jordan Davis, and I immediately don't worry about what he looks like as a run defender. Yes, he has short arms, but his get-off is so special that I think he can negate that. And I think the Eagles here at 10 have a choice of, do we want to develop Lucas Van Ness? Do we want to develop Nolan Smith? Do we want to grab an offensive lineman? Or do we want to grab a guy that I know can make an impact right away? So I've typically gone with those edge rushers and, kind of projecting them into future starting roles. But I think Kalijah Kancey can be a day one starter for this team. So 10 may be a little rich for some people. But I think pairing him up with Jordan Davis is a perfect yin and yang combination between those two and who you are drafting them to be. Now, the only concerns with Kancey is, 3 percentile arm length. So there's only so much you can do to hide that. But with how good of a get off he has and how full of a repertoire of moves he has and how good he is with his hand placement, I think he could be the exception and make that outlier number not a huge, detriment to his game. Then we get to the Titans here at 11, and I'm going to go with Peter Skoronski. I think in my perfect situation here for Tennessee, it'd be Skoronski or Dillard, some combination of those two, playing left tackle, left guard, and then you move Dane Brunskill to center. He hasn't played a whole lot of that in his career, but he did play it, I think it was 3 years ago where he had a little bit of some playing time at center. I'd be curious to see what that looks like. Look, Aaron Brewer at 6', 275, it just has not worked out. So I think by drafting Skoronski, you're finding a way to move out that wink link of Brewer and find an upgrade there somewhere across the offensive line, which is a huge part of their identity. I know there's some of the rumors around Derrick Henry swirling, and we'll kind of come back to that when we talk about Dallas in just a moment. But nevertheless, if they do decide to keep King Henry in there, improving the offensive line is going to be something that makes him that much more potent. It makes Ryan Tannehill that much better too, and especially a pass protector like Peter Skoronski. So I think it makes that offense improved kind of both sides that you could spin it. Then we get to the Houston Texans here at 12. Again, this could have easily been Christian Gonzalez. I decided to make it Devin Witherspoon. And man, I'm just thinking about a secondary of Devin Witherspoon and Derek Stingley Jr. If DSJ takes a step forward in year 2, my God, that corner tandem is going to be gross. Steven Nelson only has 1 year left on his deal. Don't even think about him when you make this selection. He is not a long-term answer. I take that from a Steelers fan. He is not a long-term answer. But Devin Witherspoon could be. And I know D'Amico Ryans coming from San Francisco. They build from the defensive line back. But, maybe based off their positioning, early second round, all I'm going to say is we will come back to it. And I think you can wait a little bit, get some defensive line reinforcements just a little bit later on. This is a deep corner class, but Devin Witherspoon fall in your lap, CB2 at 12. That's hard for me to pass up. Then we get to the Jets at pick 13. I'm going to make this... I'm gonna call a little bit audible here on the fly. No, never mind. I'm gonna go ahead and keep it at Broderick Jones. This and then who gonna end up being the pick here at 14. I thought about flipping it just a little bit, but man, I really like Broderick Jones in a zone blocking scheme. He didn't do a whole lot of that at Georgia, but his movement skills with his size and his strength, I want to see this guy getting out on the move with some momentum behind him and just giving it to whoever stands in his path. Right? He is definitely raw as a pass protector. But I think his athleticism and specifically what he could be as a run blocker buys him the time necessary to keep him in the lineup card, give him some reps, and then hopefully in a year or two you kind of refine that pass pro protection or pass protection in general. But he's really raw on a one-year starter at left tackle. You would kind of assume that. So I just think it's going to take some in-game reps and some good coaching to kind of fix that. But you're making this pick because he's got awesome size. He's got NFL caliber athleticism. He's got NFL caliber strength. Like, he's got all those boxes checked. Now it just comes down to refining that prospect. All right. Here at 14, New England, I'm going to actually have them trade back and make an AFC trade. I wonder if these two have ever made a trade. They've been so competitive with one another over the course of the Big Ben and Tom Brady careers. So I wonder if they've ever done any draft day trades, probably. But I'm going to have them make one here. Pittsburgh's got those 2 second rounders. I don't mind giving up a third because here at 14, I'm going to give them Darnell Wright. Thought about flipping this just because, I think Darnell Wright, I really want to have the conversation. Throughout Darnell Wright's career at Tennessee, it's been a gap scheme, but I think he's a good enough athlete. And the main reason I want to bring this up is going back to my offensive line rankings, which is up on the channel if you want to hear more in-depth thoughts there. The reason Wright was ahead of Jones was the movement skills. DeJuan Jones has freaky arm length, and it's like 100th percentile type stuff. Like, it is unique. And it's almost like, and it's not to say Darnell Wright doesn't have great arm length. It's almost like Will McDonald in the edge group. He has 90th percentile arm length and no one's talking about it because Tyree Wilson exists. It's kind of the same thing here with Darnell Wright and DeJuan Jones, but where I think Darnell Wright is much better than DeJuan Jones is his ability to move. He is a much more fluid athlete and doesn't nearly struggle with speed rushers as much as DeJuan Jones does. And he might be the single best anchoring tackle. Like, when he just sits down and it is ready for a bull rush. That's what made him in those Will Anderson reps so special, because it was like he could handle that, power that Anderson has in his profiling, just, sat down, squatted into it, and, took it like a man, literally. So I really want to talk about him with the Jets because I think he could be fine in a gap scheme because I think he's a good enough athlete. But here in Pittsburgh, I think the same story could be told. And here you're going to draft and play him at right tackle. I can already hear that Mike Tomlin press conference where he's talking about those exact Will Anderson reps where Darnell Wright looked so good. And then you're going to move Chukwuma Okorafor from right tackle over to left tackle. And I don't hate that. I'd prefer the Steelers to draft a left tackle. But, if Darnell Wright's one upgrade at tackle, which the tackles right now in Pittsburgh are glaring to me, the most, necessary upgrades on that offensive line at this point. They've done a lot on the interior. Now the tackles are kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. So if Wright's an upgrade at one of those tackle spots, I'm not too picky. And Chukwuma Okorafor may well be an upgrade over Dan Moore at left tackle. And Chukwuma Okorafor actually played left tackle in college, so it may be getting him back to his native spot, make him a better player overall as well. So, I don't hate this pick whatsoever, and I think Pittsburgh, with those 2 second rounders, would be willing to part way with maybe a third round pick and select a hot name right now in Darnell Wright. A lot of mocks of late that we've been reacting to have him going in the top 10. I think Green Bay at pick number 15. I'm going to do something I have not done in months. I'm going to give him a pass catcher. I have stayed away from it, and I've said time and time again, I don't think Green Bay does this. And I stand by that. But if there is an offseason where Brian Gutekunst is going to change that, it's this offseason. It's going to be in an effort to stick it to Aaron Rodgers, which sounds so petty. But given their relationship, I don't rule anything out. And really the point I want to make, and the reason I'm doing this, despite, I think this is more likely to be Nolan Smith, Lucas Van Ness, someone like that. JSN can be a number 1 guy. And once we get to my big board, I'm going to kind of come back to wide receivers, and we'll make this point then. And he's moved up my board a couple spots because I think he can be that number 1 option, even if it is from the slot. I think he could be Cooper Kupp. I think he could be Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then that offense gets so much better when Christian Watson, who looked really good, a lot of big plays down the stretch at the end of last year. But when he becomes your 2, it's like, okay, well, now we're talking. And Romeo Doubs, who an assassin of a route runner, just has those really bad drop issues. Can he clean that up? If so, him as a 3? Again, now we're talking. Add a tight end somewhere later on in this class, take a shot on a Zach Kuntz or whatever on day 3. I think you'd be just fine there. You add JSN to be the volume guy to this offense. That's how you give Jordan Love, 1, an easy target that can work the middle of the field and is a crisp route runner. And then 2, you make Christian Watson get favorable matchups. You make Romeo Doubs' assignment that much easier. Therefore, making Jordan Love that much better and giving the environment around him that much better. So, do I think they'll do this? Ultimately, no. And this isn't my last mock draft, so it's not totally my predictive mock. I am, moving more and more in that direction. But man, I haven't done this in a while, but I want to talk about it. This offense is at its best if JSN is the pick here at 15. And that is why I made this selection. All right, next up, let's talk about Washington at 16. And I'm going to actually break my corner rankings here just by one single spot. I want to go Deonte Banks, another name that's hot right now, and I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up going before one of those big 3, whether it's Joey Porter Jr., Witherspoon, or maybe Christian Gonzalez. I don't know. That one could be a little for me. But Deonte Banks, low moving costs, and that's what's most important here. No, I'm playing. 4'3", 540, 6 foot, 200 pounds, prototypical man coverage, build and athleticism. Played in a variety of coverages at Maryland, both zone and man, and he's always at the catch point. Need to work on the ball skills, but I think that can come with some time and some coaching. He's just always there. And to see a guy that's sticky in coverage and played in a variety of coverages and is that type of an athlete, that's a guy who grows round 1. And I'm looking at Washington. They need a cornerback bad long term. They need to find that shutdown guy, and Deonte Banks has that potential. And if he lives up to that potential, throw him in with that Washington pass rush and look out. Commanders defense is frightening. Then we get to New England at 17. And part of the reason I wanted to have the trade back was so JSN could be the wide receiver 1 off the board. And then I don't feel as bad about making the pick here, Zay Flowers. I had a lot of Patriots fans tell me they had him for a top 30 visit and they really like him. And, I kind of want to toy around with the idea. We're going to have Quentin Johnston fall. I haven't had a whole lot of mocks where he's not wide receiver 1 or 2. So I want to explore some different possibilities here before we get to draft night. So Flowers here at wide receiver 2. Look, he's Chris Sims wide receiver 1. There's plenty of people who like him. He's in my top 5. 5'9", right around 180 pounds. Kind of built like a fire hydrant there where he's not, short and skinny. He's not like Tutu Atwell. This guy's got a bit of a frame on him. I don't worry about him too much. Getting knocked off of routes, it's going to be there, but not nearly as much as someone like an Atwell. And great deep route running potential, tracks the ball really well. I think can make adjustments on the fly, and that kind of goes with the ball tracking. He can have that spectacular catch type of ability. And because of the weight, I don't think he's totally a liability. Contested catch spots, it's not his game, but it's not like, he's got no shot of coming down with it. And then his ability to be a satellite yak weapon. Him and Christian Gonzalez are the 2 guys I look at, and it's like, dude, these guys just move different. And there's really not a way other than that to explain it. They move different. So that type of athleticism, what you can do with Zay Flowers underneath as both someone who runs those drags and those slants, but also just gadget work, make him a yak weapon, and then throw him as a deep threat in that offense. Inside out versatility, I think, helps as well. So I'm looking at New England and I'm like, I think Juju's going to be that slot guy. Who can I play on the outside? I think Flowers can stick outside. I think Quentin Johnston can stick outside. So done a lot of Quentin Johnston into New England. Want to change it up, and I know a lot of Patriots fans are interested by Zay Flowers going to the Patriots. So I want to play with that fit here. Then at 18, the Detroit Lions are not going to be making this selection. Instead, we're going to have a little NFC trade here with Detroit moving back and trading places with the Dallas Cowboys. I've done this in previous mocks, and here it's about perfect with this trade simulator. Additional picks go to Detroit, which Brad Holmes would love. And then here at 18, I think Jerry Jones makes his final splash of the offseason and lands Bijan Robinson. He's already added Stephon Gilmore. He's already added Brandon Cooks. Now I think he's looking to find that Zeke Elliott replacement because, he was so attached to Zeke. I think there is a little bit of a sunk cost fallacy kicking in here where it's like, that was my guy, man. I hyped him up so much. We paid him that money and it didn't work out. I got to go find a new shiny toy for Cowboys fans to forget about Zeke Elliott. And Bijan Robinson is that. Good size, good weight. 4'4", 740 is not maybe electric, but I think it's totally fine. Didn't necessarily run the 40 all that clean. Could have shaved off some time there. Came in with power, came in with elusiveness. Great pass catching upside here. I'd love to see 2 backfield sets of Bijan and Tony Pollard. Just good luck linebackers. Keep up with both those guys. I'd love to see that. And I would hope Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy, the OC and head coach, I don't know who's calling plays at this point. I hope they do figure that out, and I hope they do take advantage if they do land Bijan Robinson. Him and Pollard on the field at the same time. Are you kidding me? Plus CeeDee Lamb and plus Brandon Cooks. That's awesome. So obviously a huge area of need. It's a fit that makes a ton of sense. Plus, Dallas has a good offensive line, so it's not like drafting a running back and expecting him to fix your run game. No, you're putting him in an environment where when he's running the ball, he's going to have a whole lot of success. So love that, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Dallas is willing to part way with a third and a fourth to go make that shiny move acquisition that I think Jerry is looking to make. Then we get to pick 19. I'm going to give Tampa Bay Anton Harrison. I continue to love this fit. Anton Harrison may not be for every team. Like, I don't think Pittsburgh or someone that's looking for a mauler, Anton Harrison's be their guy. Doesn't really play with a whole lot of strength, especially compared to a Darnell Wright, DeJuan Jones, Broderick Jones, those sorts of types. That being said, I think once you get to the NFL level, get into the workout room and whatnot, get on that type of nutrient dietary things like that, I think he'll be able to play a little bit stronger. It's also, I don't even necessarily know he doesn't have the strength. He doesn't really play with it. So maybe it's just coaching and kind of changing his mindset a little bit. But what I do know Anton Harrison can do is be an NFL immediate starter as a pass protector. Really good athlete as well. And, I talked about Paris Johnson Jr. and his footwork. Anton Harrison's not too far behind. And again, that athletic, fluidity. I think in the run game, he can get to the second level, pros and cons there based off, the strength that he maybe doesn't play with. But 3-year starter Oklahoma, a ton of pass protection sets under his belt, and I feel like you can draft this guy immediately and count on him being a solid pass protector. And for Tampa Bay, you have a glaring hole at one of those tackle spots. Here you draft Harrison, can feel comfortable at left tackle, and then you keep Tristan Wirfs at right tackle. No need to make a switch. What's not broken, let's not fix it. And boom, you're giving Baker Mayfield a shot. You're giving Kyle Trask a fair shot, while also, if those guys don't work out, setting up a fair situation for whoever they draft in 2024, assuming they do go, Caleb Williams, Drake May, that type of route in the next draft, giving them a solid environment and a solid offensive line there in front of them. All right, on to Seattle. I'm going to give Lucas Van Ness. Fell a little bit here, and obviously edge, interior defensive line, something we didn't get to address at 5, and I think LVN could play either. He's 270 pounds right now, 6'4", and I look at Draymond Jones, he's 6'3", 280. That's right around the mark I want to get to for my 3-4 D ends. So maybe you bulk him up a little bit, plays on the inside, or he's your power rusher you just don't really have on the edge. Mafe wins with speed and bend. That's, Uchenna Nwosu, it's kind of that, plus the ability to drop back into coverage. And Darrell Taylor, just really hasn't been all that, so I don't really even put him into the equation. But you're adding a different edge rusher to the mix, plus Taylor last year of his contract, Nwosu last year of his contract. You're kind of future-proofing the position. And I think Lucas Van Ness should go before 20. One of the younger guys, and that's the reason why he wasn't playing true edge at Iowa. But other than that, and Iowa and the Hawkeyes kind of having their way of doing business. Old guys get starts. They play their native positions. Young guys, you figure it out. I think he ends up seeing the field a whole lot more other than, that extreme type of situation. But also, we've seen him be a pretty good run defender on the inside. I wonder what he looks like there on the outside. Is there even more potential maybe there in his run defense game? Maybe. But even just what we know about him as a run defender, that's some good reinforcements for Seattle's defense. Like Detroit, there were points last year where that became a big problem spot, and then you're just getting more pass rush juice and some high-end upside. Only a 3-year player in college, so yeah, young player to try to tap into with his potential, and a underrated athlete, might I add, as well. Then here at 21, I'm going to give the Los Angeles Chargers, Jordan Addison. I love this fit. I think immediately, I know the 4.49 40 does not, say this guy has speed, but I think he plays a little bit faster than that. And plus, he's such a crisp route runner. It's not just that he runs routes in a, like he runs hard 90-degree angles or anything like that. It's the break out of the cut, and that's what makes him such an elite separator. So even if it's 4.49, DBs look like he's running 4.4 flat. So I don't really care because he's leaving dudes in the dust. So I think adding his deep route running prowess and that speed I think that he plays faster at in game is something this offense doesn't have. And a lot of Chargers fans will tell you we need speed. I think Addison brings that while also kind of setting him up to be the future Keenan Allen slot replacement. I cannot see Keenan Allen back on the roster again after next offseason, $30+ million cap hit. And I think Jordan Addison makes for a really awesome slot wide receiver and a great replacement for Keenan Allen. So you're keeping a strength to strength there in that slot wide receiver spot. And then, we'll see. Maybe you can find, another burner wide receiver in free agency or later on in the next draft or whatever, but you'll cross that bridge when you get there. So I think you get some immediate returns with Addison now while also setting up to be a future starter as well. Then here at 22, I'm actually going to have one more trade. This one's a bit of a weird one, but I'll explain it here in just one second. I'm going to have Baltimore and Minnesota trade spots here at 22 and 23. And then Baltimore made, I think it was 5 fourth-round selections. It might have been 6. Actually, I think it might have been 6 last year. So I think they understand the drop-off post fourth round is extreme. Like obviously each round has a drop off, but fourth round to fifth round is stark. So you want to accumulate those early day 3 picks. You have a little bit better of a swing of the bat. So for Baltimore to move back one spot and then take a fifth, turn it into a fourth, I think it makes a lot of sense. And then for Minnesota, you're a team that's kind of light on draft picks right now, but you can go ahead and get a really awesome fit just by, basically moving back on day 3, 30-something spots. And that player to add is Joey Porter Jr. I mean, man, press upside all over Joey Porter Jr., and that's a perfect scheme fit for what Brian Flores, wants to be running. And maybe it's him and Byron Murphy on the outside, and we haven't really seen Byron Murphy in a man press scheme, so that'll be interesting to watch, but maybe it's him and JPJ in this situation playing on the outside. I'd be here for that. And then Andrew Booth Jr., who didn't run a 40. We don't really know what that long speed officially is. Maybe he plays in the slot. Or maybe it's the other way around. Murphy plays in the slot. Booth is playing outside. Him and Caleb Evans compete. But Joey Porter Jr. is a fantastic fit for that Brian Flores defense. Minnesota could definitely use a corner. And that then takes us to Baltimore. And the reason I couldn't let Baltimore and Minnesota not trade places is because, look, I like Brian Brzee, but he ain't better than Joey Porter Jr. There was no way I was going to let Brian Brzee come off the board before Joey Porter Jr. So that was part of me kind of finessing the board there. But nevertheless, this fit also makes a lot of sense. For Baltimore, you lose Calais Campbell. Who's going to replace him there on the inside? Well, how about the 6'5", 300, I think it's like 305, but he looks even bigger than that. Interior defensive lineman that comes with high-end run-stopping ability pretty much right away. And they got a couple other pass rushers already on the roster, so I don't know if they're really leaning on him right away to kind of figure it out as a pass rusher. But he's also a guy that, maybe he figures it out sooner than what we're expecting, right? Missed a ton of time with both injuries and obviously the tragic, story with his family and his sister passing away. I was just watching the SportsCenter featured story about that, and dude, I don't know how a human powers through that, because I don't know what I would have done if that was my little sister. So a ton of credit to him to even get back on the field, and that speaks a lot about his character. But really getting back to the point here, considering how much time he lost, did he really have the full development cycle? And plus, Clemson, Miles Murphy, raw, but you like what is there. KJ Henry doesn't feel like he's taken any steps forward over the last couple of years of his, Clemson career. So it's like, maybe it's a program thing. Maybe we're putting the blame on the wrong spot. So I like the upside of Brian Brzee and that Baltimore defense, addressing the interior defensive line, a sneaky need for the team. Then we get to Jacksonville at 24. Everyone say it with me. Brian Branch, future Jaguar in the making. This is just a fit that, if I could have one draft wish come true, it would be Brian Branch landing with the Jags. He kind of fills 2 holes at once, slot corner, while also playing, future strong safety maybe. I don't really like Rayshawn Jenkins, so maybe that becomes more of a hybrid role. But right away, rookie assignment, I think you're playing Brian Branch in the slot, Darius Williams, Tyson Campbell, they stick outside, and that becomes a really awesome trio. And there's just so much you can do with Branch. He's a sure tackler, so you're feeling like you're getting some impact in the run game. I think he'd be used as a blitzer. And then, of course, great in coverage, especially man coverage, but I don't think he's bad in zone by any means. So I just think you're getting a true impact player. And I would, if anybody was going to take a bet with me, and this may surprise some people, I'd be willing to say Brian Branch is the best defensive rookie after year one. I will put money that he will have the best rookie season of anybody on the defensive side of the ball in this class. So anyways, let's move on now, because we all know I love that fit. I've talked about it plenty of times before. Let's talk about the Jags here, the Giants here at 25. This is where I'm going to have Quentin Johnston finally come off the board. Felt like a good landing spot for him to go, and it felt like a good addition for the Giants. One, I wanted to explore what happens if Quentin Johnston does, fall down the board just a little bit. Haven't really explored that in a whole lot of my mocks, but it's a possibility. The league split on him. It only takes one team to like him. But therefore, maybe all the teams early don't like him. And all these teams in the back half are like, okay, well, if he gets to us, we'll take a shot. And, I look at the Giants wide receiver room, and there's a lot of slot onlys, there's a lot of slightly built guys, and Quentin Johnston is neither of that. So you're adding 6'3", 208 pounds, a ton of straight line speed. I know the Pro Day 40 was a little disappointing, and I'm too disappointed, but also an insane vertical, great broad jump. And then my other concern, 7'3", 1-3 cone, that is really less than ideal. So if you do have route running concerns with Quentin Johnston, that is not a drill that's going to change your mind. But I think winning in 2/3 of the field is enough. And Quentin Johnston is an underneath yak weapon satellite player. He can be special because he has one of the highest forced missed tackle rates in college football over the last couple of years, while of course having an abundance of size and speed and profiles as a guy who can win deep down the field. And again, maybe not the most insane route tree at TCU, but found a way to somehow get open on a lot of posts and sure seemed to run past a lot of guys on goes. So really my main thing with Quentin Johnston is if he can add a slant and basically serve as like an inside counter to kind of steal that from the pass rush, lingo. If he has an inside counter like DK Metcalf does, then that go ball in that post becomes that much more lethal. So a slant and then a comeback if I can get greedy and ask for one more route out of him. If he adds those 2 routes of his route tree, I think Quentin Johnston can be just fine because, again, not only the deep ball element, but a great underneath yak weapon as well. And then we get to the Detroit Lions. After trading back to 26, I'm going to finally make it happen. Jack Campbell, first linebacker off the board, and a first-round pick. First time I've had either of those 2 occurrences happen. And, I was planning this one out, and I was like, oh, man, Jack Campbell, I'm going to sneak him in the first round. I'm going to be the first guy to do it. And then I watch Bengals mock. He puts him to Buffalo. And then I do the grade the mock where he goes to Philadelphia and Sam Monson's mock. And I'm like, oh, well, someone else got there before me. But I promise I was thinking about this more than a week ago. But I think this makes a ton of sense. And also you get to snipe the Bills here, who I do think, shout out to Bengal. Like, that is actually a really sneaky fit and a good ad for that Bills defense. But for the Lions here, it's like you pair him up with Malcolm Rodriguez. You have one big, heavy set, quote unquote heavy set, prototypical linebacker build with plus athleticism more than I think a lot of people were expecting. And then a 96 percentile 3-cone is off the charts, and I think you see it on tape. And you pair him with Malcolm Rodriguez, who awesome coverage player, honestly plays more physical than you would think too for someone who's like sub 6 foot. But he's out there for the coverage ability first and foremost. And your main concern is his height and his weight. Well, pair him up with Jack Campbell, and, it's yin and yang. One guy's strength perfectly matched the other guy's weaknesses, and then vice versa. So I love this fit. And for Detroit, I mean, moving back, accumulating extra picks, a third, a fourth, and you get Jack Campbell, who I think at this point, I don't know if he makes it to 48. So this might be your opportunity to get him. Don't really love it at 18, but trade back and 26. I'm here for Detroit making that selection. Then the Bills here at 27. They're going to get a faller here. I am shocked that this happened because I love me some Nolan Smith, not only the player, but who I think the character is, and just hearing him talk and some of the podium stuff from the combine, it's like, how could you not love this kid? Natural born leader, and then you add him to Buffalo, and I think that type of leadership ability is something that will stick out to someone like a Sean McDermott and a Brandon Beane. But also, like, Von Miller got hurt, and that Bills pass rush evaporated like that. So that's a problem. And also, Von Miller's coming off of a late season knee injury, and he's 34 years old, if memory serves. Are we even guaranteed that Von Miller is going to be the same dude he was last year? So with or without Von Miller, they needed more edge help. And unfortunately, Greg Rousseau has not fully come to fruition. Boogie Basham hasn't fully worked out. AJ Epineza has not panned out. They need to keep swinging the bat at edge. And I think if Nolan Smith makes it all the way down to 27, it's kind of a no-brainer there for Buffalo. Next, Cincinnati at pick number 28. Really easy one here for me. I'm going to go Michael Mayer. Yes, I know a lot of people are having Kincaid be the first wide receiver off the board or tight end off the board. But I do think the blocking limitations that he shows on tape will deter some teams. We'll see, though. I mean, pass catching upside is definitely there. We'll talk about Kincaid in tomorrow's video. Mayer here, I think you're kind of getting the mix of Darnell Washington and Kincaid. Not the athlete that Kincaid is, or really even Washington, but he's not bad. I mean, I think we have to understand there's a difference. There is something in the middle between a great athlete and a bad athlete. It's being okay. And it's okay to be an okay athlete at tight end, especially when you're a great blocker like Mayer in a phone booth. Maybe he could do a little bit better on the move, and again, maybe that's where the athleticism concerns come to fruition. But man, I think he's an underrated yards after the catch weapon. He's an absolute tank. We talked about Jack Campbell, prototypical linebacker build. Michael Mayer is built out of a lab to be a tight end. Works the middle of the field really, really well. Might be the best contested catch, pass catcher, wide receiver, tight end, point blank, anything. He might be the best contested catch receiver, pass catcher in this class. So brings a whole lot of value there. And I think as a future Tyler Boyd, middle of the field, between the hashes, where's that production going? I think Michael Mayer can kind of fill that vacuum. And again, I think you're getting a solid blocking tight end. So it does alleviate some of those concerns that you might have with specific Lyle Collins there at right tackle. All right, on to pick 29. Easy one here. Myles Murphy. He is the exact freaky athlete with good size, great size, really, that the Saints normally trade up for. And I thought about maybe having him trade up to go get Myles Murphy. But here I decided to have him stick and pick there, light on draft capital, too. That made it tricky. But Murphy is exactly, they drafted Peyton Turner. They move up and draft Marcus Davenport. I mean, Myles Murphy checks all those same boxes. 6'5", 270 pounds, freaky athlete. And again, kind of like with Brzee, I don't know at this point, do we blame the lack of pass rush production and growth in that field on him or Clemson, because at this point it's becoming a kind of a track record with Clemson. Brent Venables or not, but I will say Myles Murphy, his true freshman season was one of the best true freshmen in college football, and it's just kind of disappointing he didn't get any better. But that being said, he did stand out in college football as the best true freshman, or one of the best true freshmen, getting consistent playing time. So I think there's a lot to be excited about if you were to make this pick in New Orleans, and plus he's that third pass rusher. He can sit behind Cam Jordan, he can play behind Peyton Turner and kind of have a limited role at first to then grow as a pass rusher and then maybe profiles to be that future Cam Jordan replacement. All right, next up, Philadelphia, second to last pick. I hate repeating picks, especially my first rounders, because, spoiler alert, they tend to do the best here on the channel. But O'Cyrus Torrence played right guard at Florida, and the Eagles need a right guard. I mean, I just can't see why this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, you have Cam Jurgens, but give me O'Cyrus Torrence, and then let's keep Cam Jurgens as center only. That's what I scouted him as. And Torrence, I mean, he may not be the most fleet of foot guard, but I really don't think he's that bad. I mean, it's not special by any means, but it's not like it's a liability. Again, let's find the difference between great and bad. Like, he's a fine mover, but dude has hands the size of a piece of paper, and on top of that, awesome strength. Has the weight, and again, I think he moves well enough, carrying 325, 330 pounds. So, yeah, and I mean, I think I'm also a little biased to O'Cyrus Torrence because I love guys that make a leap from a small school to a big school. That's why I was fully on the board with Jared Verse before he decided to opt back in and go back to Florida State. But I've seen O'Cyrus Torrence handle a jump from Louisiana Lafayette to playing in the SEC at Florida, and actually went one-on-one with Jalen Carter and more than held his own. So I'm a big O'Cyrus Torrence fan, and I think back half the round one is some awesome value, and literally played the exact position the Eagles need a starter at. This one was easy to me. And then here at 31, last pick in this mock is going to be B.J. Ojulari. He's always a guy that I have fall way too much in my mocks, and it's nothing against Ojulari. And I think Kansas City is the exact spot where he should go. And honestly, if he's to pick at 31, I'm not surprised whatsoever. You have Charles Omenihu, you have George Karlaftis. Those guys can be your regular starters, especially in rundowns, because they have the mass and they have the run-stopping ability more in their profile than B.J. Ojulari. And, spoiler alert, the Chiefs are a good football team. They're going to win a lot of games, and they're going to be leading a lot of games. Therefore, that DPR third down specialist, I'd argue it's worth a first-round pick for Kansas City. And to draft a guy like B.J. Ojulari, who has great speed, great bend, and a full arsenal of moves, and knows when and where to implement them, and knows how to play chess with an offensive lineman, knows how to say, I'm going to set up this move, and I'm going to show you it later, and then I'm going to, kind of counter it later on with this when I need to get a big play. He knows how to play that game of chess and set up one thing and come back to it later on. And for the Chiefs, again, they're going to be playing ahead a lot. Like that DPR, that third pass rusher is going to see the field a ton. So this is kind of the perfect situation for B.J. Ojulari to go to. Not the biggest, not the heaviest, not the strongest guy. So keep him up the field for rundowns. But then let him do his stuff. Let him do what B.J. Ojulari does best in passing situations, and that will pay dividends big time for Kansas City. So that is going to do it for the first round portion of this updated mock draft. I'll scroll across the top so everybody can see each and every pick one more time. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who went too early? Who went too late? What do you think of the trades? Do you think Green Bay might take a pass catcher round one this year? Let me hear all your thoughts on this mock draft down below. And of course, who's your favorite team? And did you like the pick I gave your squad? That is what matters most. But hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. Be sure to hit that like button. It would mean the world to me. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And again, if channel memberships is anything that interests you, be sure to join and see your name at the end of all my videos. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Be sure to come back tomorrow for round two. But until then, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.